You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
It is time for the Thursday edition. Nick Alberga and Carter Hutton, brought to you by Betano. I'm just trying to get over the fact that somebody thought it was a wise idea to steal Jaromir Jagr bobbleheads, man. What's going on there?
I love the idea, honestly. Imagine having how many thousands of them jacked in your truck. This is great. I love it. It's crazy. That's the world we live in, Nick, though. Someone got the inside scoop and they stole some Jagr bobbleheads. I'm sure the mullet is nice on that bobblehead, too.
Man, it's a wild time to be alive. Like, I'm not sure if it's the same way where you live right now, but like Grand Theft Auto, like it feels like I'm living in a video game. Like the amount of people I know that have had their car stolen in the last 6 months alone, like it's a crazy wild time in this world, man.
Yeah, we're not dealing with that up here in Thunder Bay. That's just you big city boys. We got other problems here. Maybe snowmobiles are getting stolen up here, but not cars. So yeah, it's crazy. I listen to the news a lot, and obviously it seems like a big issue right now in Toronto. So we'll see. Hopefully they can clean that up because that is crazy times.
All I can picture about Thunder Bay is just the Stahl family doing whatever the fuck they want. Is that what it's like, or?
No, they're only here in the summers. They got camp. They keep to themselves, man. They're just like quiet Dutch boys. They're good. They're good. Honestly, I bet you they still have their first paycheck. They're not big spenders or balling out of control. It's honestly a good place to live. We get a hard rap because I think where we are located, but it's a big enough city that there's a ton of amenities, ton of stuff to do. And if you like being outside, like I got a cottage half an hour from the city, it's easy living compared to how you guys do it in the big smoke there.
The Stahl family, the Hutton family, that Matt Murray's from Thunder Bay too, no?
He is, yeah. He moved to Toronto, Muskokas. He just bought a place over at the country club my wife runs. So he sent me a video the other day of the pad he bought, and he's pumped to move back home because it's a great place to live, baby.
Yeah, and that's the one we're trying to track down, maybe down the road. If you can hook that up, would be to get Matt Murray on this podcast. I wonder if we'd have to wait till after the season when his contract's done with the Maple Leafs. But man, I got some questions for that guy. I don't know if you do, but it's been just a crazy career considering the way it started for Matt Murray, right? If you remember back, almost a decade ago, back-to-back cups, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. He came in like on fire. Even in the American League, he was lights out. So he came in. Obviously, Pittsburgh was good at times, and at times they protected him. Then at times he was dynamite, man. There was a guy that I always respected. I trained with him a lot. We kind of grew up together in a sense of as he got older. I'm a lot older than him, but he knew when to play good. Like he could turn it on. He could get dialed in. His focus. He was a big game goalie, and that's what happens when you win 2 cups.
16-17. Okay, so it's not necessarily a decade, but we're approaching that territory. I know you've always got the betting cap on. How would you attack a team that got in a skirmish at practice? I'm talking about Detroit happening yesterday, and then they play today, I believe, against Arizona. Would you throw some money on Detroit as a galvanizing moment to win a hockey game after a fight in practice?
I love it. That wasn't even we can get
Yeah,
way
it's
worse than that. I've seen way worse than that. This is good. This is what you need. It's competitive. It's showing that these guys care, right? They're going to go out and practice. They're going to put it on the line. And I'm telling you, Stevie Y likes this. He's been involved, and I'm sure in some shady stuff going on in practice. I've seen it happen teams I've played for. Some coaches snap and go nuts about it. Some coaches, let it, it is what it is, right? Guys are competitive. There's a lot of juices flowing out there when it comes to practice. And it just shows you guys are pissed off they're losing and they want to try to win hockey games. So honestly, from my perspective, I love it. I'm just glad that, I wasn't involved in it because I'm not much of a fighter.
Huts, I don't know what these guys like anymore because Brendan Shanahan was known to be that physical guy who can score goals, and then his team plays like a bunch of weenies. So to speculate on what Steve Yzerman wants from his team, I think would be nonsense. I think it just does show that enough of this gritty shit. I mean, it's kind of fascinating to me. Like 2 months ago, we're talking about Jake Wallman. Everybody's feeling great in Detroit. And it just shows you this time year what a losing streak can go, where you look at the Red Wings, 2-3 weeks ago, firmly in a playoff spot, now fighting for their playoff lives. It's a really tense time of year, isn't it?
It is, right? It's one of those times too where it's like you fall behind and it seems like you just can't catch up. Like you win a game and the team you're chasing wins, or like you go on a little streak of 4-1 and you're like, man, we barely gained any points. So it's tricky. But when you lose, man, do you drop fast? And for the Wings, I think they've been hanging on by a thread in a sense. Like Alex Lyon has obviously played really, really well this year, and he's been great. And right now, it just seems like the wheels have come off, right? Like they got absolutely spanked the other night in Buffalo, and he just can't seem to stop a puck. And so for me, that's a bit worrisome, but not against Alex Lyon by any mean. He's been playing out of his mind for, a couple seasons here. So this Wings team, it's once you fall behind, man, it's hard to catch up, and they're showing that.
Yeah, I think the Red Wings were a big time regression candidate. It's obviously happened. I think they were calling upon Alex Lyon more than people thought and knew. And I think he's come back to reality a bit. I mean, he's been an epic story for the last year, dating to his time getting the Florida Panthers into the Stanley Cup playoffs last year. You almost forget about that because of the monster run for Sergei Bobrovsky. I won't lie, I was smiling ear to ear watching the Chicago Anaheim game on Tuesday night. I was actually thinking of you. Don't feel weird about that, but it was because Peter Mrazek was in that game and we almost saw a goalie fight. And I don't know about you, and maybe it's not the same because you're a former goalie in this league, but I got so jacked and ready. And the fucking refs, they always have to get in. They could just never let the goalies go at it. It was mayhem, but I wasn't shocked Peter Mrazek was in there. Leaf great, Peter
No,
Mrazek.
he gets hot, right? He jumps in, and I don't mind what he's doing. Like Gudas is just taking advantage of his guy, and he's just trying to help him out. He's not trying to jump in or jump him or throw a punch, and he's just literally trying to make sure his player doesn't get totally beat up. But for me, Mrazek, he's one of those guys that runs a bit hot. I don't know if you know his history, but
Oh,
he's
yeah.
not a great fight. He's not a great fighter. I can attest to that. And I honestly wish that the refs would just let them go at that point, right? Like he's coming down. We saw the same thing before with Fleury and Binnington. Everybody wants it, right? It's not the end of the world. You're still there. Let them fight a bit. Nobody's going to get hurt. They're big boys. So I love Gibson coming down. And that's kind of how I felt when I've fought Mrazek. I think the same score, 6-2. I was rattled that I was getting lit up and I skated down and fed him his lunch, but I retire 1-0 in my professional fighting career.
I love how you say fed him his lunch because, man, I scoured YouTube hockey fights looking for this scrap with Peter Mrazek so you could break it down. I couldn't find it. So as far as I'm concerned, it never happened.
Yeah, you just got to YouTube. It's like Rockford versus Grand Rapids, buddy. I don't know if it went on hockey fights. I'm not that
Yeah.
because it was a bench brawl. Everybody was going, pal. But trust me, when you find it, you'll show me a little more respect on this show, Nikki.
Well, fair enough, man. And the confusion in that game too. Like, I don't know what happened. I guess people don't know the rules, but John Gibson thought he was tossed. So, like, the guy, I think he was in the showers when they told him, "Yo, you got to come back. Like, you didn't get ejected from the game." So they went with Dostal. Like, it was mayhem. And there's nothing better to me than two teams who have no relevancy at all to the standings scrapping. Like, I think you're just trying to show the coach for next year, right?
Oh yeah, you're honestly sometimes those teams are dangerous too, right? You're
Yeah.
just trying to make an impact. You're playing for a contract, or if you are a guy, you're just competitive, right? He brings it out. And honestly, Connor Bedard, man, I wish he wouldn't have missed so
Cool.
many games this year because he has been electric. Connor with the ball. I saw one of the things online about Bubble Budsy or whatever. Like, oh my goodness, it's so funny. And he's lights out. His awareness, his playmaking ability and passing is crazy. Like for a young guy, it's nuts to think that he's only 18 and he's getting this done right now.
Guy is horny to shoot the puck right now. I think he's got 12, 13, 14, 15 shots on goal in the last 3 games. I had his shot prop the other night. And yeah, the vision's incredible. I'm very curious to see what the Hawks do to support him this offseason. I know they've obviously taken some flyers and some vets. They've re-signed some guys like Mrazek, as we mentioned, and Nick Foligno. But like outside of Taylor Hall, what are they going to do in Chicago to support a guy like Connor Bedard? And I'm always so fascinated when you have these star players. Like, do you let them grow or do you try to win right away? Like we're seeing the Hawks really bottom out. But like, I mean, do you want to waste like the ELC years of Connor Bedard's contract is my question because the next deal is going to be massive.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, right? Like he's going to get paid. And I just don't know if I love this idea of like stripping teams down to the studs, right? Like I know you
Yeah.
need to rebuild in a sense and get it. But it's hard when you get all the way down and you're trying to do this huge rebuild. It's really hard to bounce back from that. And especially when you have a guy that's on his entry level contract where you have a little more money to spend. Cause like, what's his next deal going to look like? You're talking 8 years. Like there's going to be no bridge deal. Like he's getting max and he's going to get a crazy contract because the standard's been set by so many guys before him in that echelon. So it's interesting because they don't really have guys that like keep pace with him, right? Like I know they had a plan for Taylor Hall. Like he obviously got hurt. Like it'd be nice to see them make some sort of move because they have a few decent pieces. But like when you watch the Hawks play, man, it is a free for all defensively. Like I
Yeah.
watch that. I don't love their goalies by any means. Like Mrazek's played very well this year, but man, those guys are hung out to dry most nights, and it's a tough game. It's fun for Bedard to watch, but I think if you actually want to build the team, this is not the way to go about it right now.
It is very triggering for me to watch Peter Mrazek, considering what we saw from Peter Mrazek as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I still can't believe they went out there and they thought that was the guy, and he literally couldn't stop the puck. And again, join the laundry list of goalies that came to Toronto and couldn't stop the puck. And ironically enough, he goes to Chicago, one of the worst teams in the NHL the last couple of years, and he can stop the puck. Some housekeeping notes, Huts. First and foremost, I invite everybody to check out the Leafs Nation After Dark with Zach Phillips coming up tonight. It's the Leafs and the Philadelphia Flyers, so looking forward to that one. And we had a chance earlier this week to spend some time with one of your former teammates, Ilya Lyubushkin. That's coming up in about 30 or so here.
Yeah, no, it'll be good. It was nice of Bush to jump on. Obviously, we tried to get him the day of and just caught up in travel and, getting to Canada. But, he's excited to be here and a great guy. He shows it. There's a little loss in the language barrier, but honestly, I'm telling you, I played with this guy. He's a great man, a great family man, great teammate, and a great hockey player. So he's not glitz and glamour like some of the Leafs we're used to. This is going to be a guy that's, you're used to him. I think he's been there obviously twice now, but at the same time, he's going to do what it takes come playoff time.
And so Ilya Lyubushkin's coming up again in about 30 at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube. If you're watching right now, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, Leafs Morning Take wherever you find your podcast. Turn on those mentions and those notifications as well. That would be fantastic. And make sure if you're listening to us in podcast form, leave us a review, a 5-star review. That would be fantastic. Really help the brand and the podcast out. Brought to you by DoorDash. It's time for the appetizer. For a limited time, our listeners can get 25% off. Up to $10 in value and 0 delivery fees in their first order of $15 or more when you download the DoorDash app. Enter code NATION25. That's code NATION25, all in uppercase, 25% off your first order with DoorDash. Offer valid in Canada. Subject to change. Terms apply. So you want to talk about players who earn new contracts. Bobby McMahon has been on fire. 8 goals in 14 games leading into this one against the Philadelphia Flyers. Signs a 2-year extension worth $1.35 million per season. Your thoughts, Huts?
I like it. I think it's a decent depth signing. He's been responsible. He's a little more mature, a guy that can play on the defensive side of the puck and score. And it's not like he's new to scoring. It's not like this is a little outburst, right? You look at him a year ago playing in the American League, in 30 games, having 21 goals. Like those are ridiculous numbers. Like I don't know if everyone understands how good the American Hockey League and how hard it is to score there as well. So he's a guy, he can score, he can add some depth. And I think with his maturity and experience, learning to play on the other side of the puck, especially as a guy that isn't a silver spooner. Like he's not a big pick. He's not someone that's going to come in and expect things, right? We can see that we're going to talk about someone later on who expects things and wants things to go his way, where when you're a mature guy, you've come the hard road, you just want to play and you're going to do whatever you're going to take. You're going to put your stats and all that aside to do what's best for the team, but also he has that element. So when someone does get hurt, he gets a better opportunity. He's going to help this hockey team. I love this signing. I just think he's a low maintenance guy. It didn't cost a lot of money and he can add some depth to this team.
I'm right there with you again. The 82 game pace. So he's got 40 games under his belt, 10 goals, 18 points, prorated over 82. That's 21 goals, 37 points for $1.35 million. If he can get somewhere in that ballpark, I think that's incredible value. Number one, the salary cap's moving up this summer. And number two, considering some of the guys you have to pay starting next year, a boost in pay at that, and specifically Matthews, specifically Willie Nylander, you need guys like this to filter throughout your lineup. And I think that's a great value buy. Good on McMahon. I wonder how much money he earned in the last 2 months in terms of scoring goals and doing all that. And you just need guys like this on your roster. So I actually think the value's there for this one.
Yeah, and I like this play by Tree Living too. Like what I find sometimes in guys that have never had one-way contracts or like a big deal like this is you hold him to the flame right now, because now he gets this offer and he goes home and he thinks, okay, if I don't take this deal, maybe he keeps playing and he gets that pace. He's going to be worth a lot more in free agency, right? But for him is the pressure of like, I've never been paid before, or I'm an injury away from this changes everything. I need to get my money. So I like this play from both sides, right? Like Bobby McMahon, not necessarily betting on himself, taking the sure thing, making sure he's in the league no matter what for the next 2 years or going to get a chance to be, where Tree Living, adding value immediately, knowing that if he keeps playing this well, man, it's going to cost us a lot more. So I love it from both sides. I think it's a good play by management. And obviously I'm happy for Bobby McMahon. I'm a big guy of people that earn it the hard way, right? Not just giving it to him.
Yeah, and I think there's obviously a level of like, this team gave me a shot to stick in the NHL, which I think, and maybe you can speak to this. I can't. A player like you hold that tight to your heart and say, you know what, that's probably why I'm going to do it. I'm just more so curious, like how you land at 1.35. Like you're telling me if the Leafs came at him and said, "Here's 2 years at a mil pure," like he wouldn't say yes. That's what the intrigue was for me, is like how they landed at that number. You know?
Yeah, I'm sure there's some comparables at his agent. Like, trust me, they're
Sure.
going to try to jack it up as much as they can in that sense, right? I think it just comes down to the fact of getting it done early, eliminates the risk on both sides, right? Where, let's meet in the middle. We'll take care of you, you take care of us kind of thing. So it's an interesting signing for sure. I know the number is where it is, but I would guarantee you there's got to be some comparables age-wise, goals-wise, where they're playing off as an agency. Like I've been through this a million times, right? Where I usually would go to free agency. I never signed during the season, but I played with lots of guys that are just depth players that would always get these sort of contracts because of the fact that it's like, well, you could risk it and keep playing the season out, or you take this money now and get you on terms. So honestly, I love it. There's not really anything bad for me to say about it. Obviously see how it plays out. And I'd assume with his maturity, it's not like he's just gonna stop producing or stop trying or shut the mill, right? Like he wants to be there. Now he's got his chance to really make some money on the next deal.
So you talk about contract comparables. What was the contract comp when you signed with Buffalo all those years ago? Was it Marty Brodeur?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was up there. Well, you know what my problem was? I was just late to the party. Too old. Too old. I was 31 at that point, and I just wanted to get that Nick Alberga morning take money.
Oh, buddy. Good one. No, I think it's always fascinating when it comes to, players, how they sign the comps. Like, I think there's a lot that happens behind the scenes. I would love a documentary, quite frankly, on that one day, like negotiations going back and forth. You've lived it.
Yeah. No, it is. It is a cool side of it, like the shadiness that goes on. I don't want to touch on it too much, but there's a lot of shadiness that goes on before
Mhm.
free agency. Like, I had my career year. I led the league in save percentage and goals against playing in St. Louis, which obviously was a good team. I was 31. I had things
Yeah.
against me, of course, that they're going to find. And the way that teams come at you and compare you and chop you down, and then your agent's trying to build you up. So like your agent definitely does a good job of buffering it. But finding comparables and then as things grow, like I remember my first contract offer, I think was Buffalo, was 2 years at 2.65 a year. And I remember
Oh,
being like, holy shit, like this is a lot of money, right? Like, and I remember calling my dad being like, hey, this is where we're at. And he's like, take it. That's good. Take it. Right. And I'm like, my agent's like, no, what are you nuts? I end up getting 3 years at like an extra like almost 3 million on that. So it's funny, the process. It's a bit intimidating for me. I always wanted term, right? Because I was always scared of not being in the league and the more I could get, where that's why I always respect players like, obviously Austin Matthews is on another level, but how he takes those short-term deals and bets on himself to play well, be healthy, where I was like, anything to stay in the league is good by me.
dude, this is hilarious, and that's great insight. But I guess the chat thinks you're 3,000 years old. Somebody asked, Daniel asked, no, Katie asked, Carter, did you play with Dominic Hasek? If so, how was it?
Yeah. I'm only 38. Come on here. What the heck? Where's
Holy
my
shit, man. How
hairline
old do
gone
these
that
people think
far
you
back
are,
there?
man? Like 60 years old?
Gee, I'm not that far. I met Dominic Hasek one time, told me I was a good goalie in Czech though. So I don't know if he was
Wow.
just lying to me. And then in the Buffalo locker room. So he liked the way I played. So that's something I remember meeting him. But no, I did not play with Dominic Hasek. Marty Brodeur, actually, I played against when he was in St. Louis, when I
Yeah.
was in Nashville. And I put my first game ever in the NHL with the Philadelphia Flyers. Marty Brodeur played. So I played against Marty, and he was actually my goalie coach in St. Louis. But I'm not that old. Give me a break here.
No, fair enough, dude. That's sort of funny you bring that up, because one of my buddies was drafted by Colorado a couple years back, was a goalie, retired now, but I think he took part in one preseason NHL game, and he was on Colorado, and he took on St. Louis, and I think Marty Brodeur like had a half game for that game. Like it was something like that. It was a legendary goalie. If it wasn't Brodeur, it was somebody else. I forget who it was. It might have been Marty, but like what a claim to fame. You get one game, one preseason game in the show, and you play, and I think he posted a half game shutout, and it's against a legend. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, it's deadly. You always remember your
Yeah.
first one, right? Like my
Yeah.
first call up was to
I
Philly
remember my
and
first one.
Yeah, Brian Boucher. Well, that's a different topic. Brian
Oh, is it?
Boucher was starting, and we were up 5-1 in the or 5-0 with like 7 or 8 minutes to go, and we scored. They scored to break Boucher's shutout, and he came over to the bench. He's like, "Hey, get ready, you're going in." And I was like, "Deer in the headlights. What are
Yeah.
you talking about? Just messing with me." So you definitely remember that. Obviously, a cool experience. Then getting to know Marty a little more later on was obviously something unique for me, as him being my goalie coach in St. Louis.
Mitch Marner, not at practice. Hut's lower body injury, unlikely to play here against the Philadelphia Flyers. I asked Rosie this earlier this week. I'll ask you now. What's your level of concern pertaining to Marner right now?
No, I'm not concerned at all. I think this is
Yeah.
just something that's a tweak that he's just going to have to manage. Ankles are tricky, right? Like you don't want this to become something more than it is. So I think just being cautious with it, being smart, because come playoff time down the stretch, you're going to need him. And I think this is a good time of year to get a little break, even if it isn't that bad, because once things start moving at this point, there's no catching up. And it comes at you hard and fast here the last little bit. And then when playoffs come.
Definitely. And I think, again, load management's a thing. They're never going to talk about it publicly, right? And I think the key here is to make sure everybody's good to go. I know there's been speculation that maybe Austin Matthews has been dealing with something, John Tavares the last little while. I think the goal here is obviously to solidify a playoff spot, put yourself in a good position, but make sure everybody's rearing to go, man. Like we're 5 weeks away from this thing. It's pretty crazy how quickly time could fly in this league.
I know it moves fast, and especially right now, it seems like there's just games. This has probably been a little break here these few days without having a game, so it's weird jumping on and not having like action that was just recent. So for me, it's kind of that eat, sleep hockey right now, right? I remember going through this phase. It's like the dog days of the year, right? Like the trade deadline just ended. Everybody knows who their team is going to be, and the games just start coming, and every game seems to be more and more important. And you're really trying to find that like galvanizing moment or like the team, what can we build on, what can we find, and it's going to be an interesting time for a lot of these teams because there's still going to be some movement, and there's going to be, the Atlantic obviously seems set to get like the top three for the Leafs, but at the same time, man, they got to be playing some good hockey because there's a lot of dangerous teams that are moving up, and it's going to be a big challenge come playoff.
Yeah, it looks like Boston or Florida. I mean, it's going to be difficult. And at this point, covering this team and being a fan of this team, I couldn't care less who they play, man. I've experienced losses to Montreal and Columbus and Boston. Like, fuck, they've lost to Tampa. They've lost to everybody. I really could not care less who they play. I think this team is good enough to beat anybody on any given night, even if it's a 7-game series. So Callie Yarncrok's on the first power play unit. Granted, I say that you take everything Sheldon Keefe does with a grain of salt when it comes to line combinations, but they were practicing with it at least on Wednesday, and that's PP1 with Yarncrok on it. So Riley, Matthews, Tavares, Nylander, Yarncrok. Is Yarncrok undervalued, do you think, in what he brings to this team, just his versatility?
I think so too. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife. I spent 3
Yeah.
years with him in Nashville. Not as a coach, I was a player. I'm not that old, and so Yarny's a good guy. Like I think his skill is sneaky good. Like he's one of those guys that has a ton of skill. When he was in the Swedish league, he was like one of the most offensive players when he came over. Even him and when I remember practicing with Yarncrok and Forsberg for the 3 years, the
Oh,
amount of
wow.
skill these guys had, where Forsberg's adaptive to the game is a bit higher. Like you see what he does at high levels and high speeds in the NHL, where Yarncrok does it, but he sticks to his guns. He's good in his D zone. He's good in all three zones pretty much. He's like a Swiss Army knife out there. And he's a perfect player that can play anywhere up and down your lineup. So I love Calle Yarncrok. I love this signing when it first happened. But I also think he's, again, like I talked about Bobby McMahon, he's a guy that you could slot into a defensive role and he's not going to complain about it. He's going to go that. And now you move him up. That's why he's getting moved up, because they know he has a skill and they know what they're going to get from him. So I like this opportunity for Yarny, and I think it's going to benefit the Leafs knowing that he can move up and down the lineup and, really get the job done here. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes for him.
And most importantly, I mean, he has the utmost trust of his head coach. Like he plays him in every facet. He plays him in OT, plays him on the PK, plays him on the power play. Like every coach, and you know this as good as anybody, every coach has their favorites. And Calle Yarncrok is probably the favorite, the personal favorite of Sheldon Keefe. He loves him. He's very, very reliable. And I will say, like that's one of the great things that Sheldon Keefe, or excuse me, Kyle Dubas did for this team, was bringing Calle Yarncrok. He's been outstanding and so important. His versatility is so big. There's not a lot of players who can do what a guy like Calle Yarncrok brings to the table in different facets of the game. Speaking of which, Nick Robertson, we've talked about him the last couple of weeks. It doesn't look like he's going to get into the lineup here against Philadelphia, but it's pretty much put up or shut up time for this guy. No, eventually when he gets back into this lineup, he has to prove he can stick, or I think it's curtains for his Maple Leafs career.
Yeah, I think at this point it is, I feel like he's never happy, and it's been one of those ones where even when I spent some time with the Leafs and when I went with the Marlies, like it seemed like he's never happy with anything. So it's tricky for me. I think it might be a family thing too. You have your brother who's super successful,
Yeah.
and you had all these expectations. Where when I look at Bobby McMahon and I look at Yarncrok, a guy that can go up and down the lineup, where you see Nick Robertson, he almost has to be like one-dimensional at this point. Like he just needs to be trying to score goals or that's
Yeah.
it. So I struggle with players with like this because of the fact that it needs to be earned, right? Where for me, I've always been a player that if things weren't going my way, I'm like reflecting on myself. Okay, what can I do better? Like, trust me, they don't want to not play you. Like, they want you to be good. They want you to score. They want you to do all the good things. If you're good enough, they're going to play you. So I think needs to be more accountability on his end personally. And I think at this point, it's, especially after the trade deadline, moving him, not getting moved or anyone taking him, they see this as a fact of next year he can't clear waivers and he's probably toast, right?
Well, that's going to be the debate. And then people are going to come from the other side and say, hey, this guy's good. He should be in the top 6. They need players like this, similar to McMahon, where they don't make a lot of money. And I get that. But we're at a point where he's 22 years of age. I do think he's one-dimensional. Unfortunately, he's not good enough defensively to play in a shutdown role. So what are you going to have Nick Robertson on your fourth line? Like, I think that this guy just has no identity. And I'm with you. I think it's almost a detriment having the brother he does in Dallas, where it's like, I have to live up to that. And unfortunately, I think since the get-go of Nick Robertson's career, he's been unable to live up to expectation because of the pressure of knowing who his brother is. Like, I think it's part of the impact here. He can't just be his own guy. And he's just failed to find that consistency. But I couldn't agree more. Like, he's a guy, to me, he's not doing much if he's not scoring goals. And unfortunately, I mean, they've tried him in top 6 roles. They've tried him with the big boys. He's just not sticking to me.
Yeah, for me, I've always mentioned this playing. I would always consider the American Hockey League like a bottleneck, right? Where you
Yeah.
have all the best of the best. You have the best OHL, the best, or CHL, the best Europeans. Everybody ends up there, the best goalies, NCAA. And then it's like the guys that can distinguish themselves. There's obviously the outliers, right? You talk about the Marners and Matthews, just go straight to the NHL, where a lot of guys aren't like that. You have to go to the American League. You have to work on your game defensively. And it's the guys that can identify that can play on the other side of the puck first that usually get the best chance in the NHL, because then you become accountable. You talk about Calle Yarncrok, where for me, Sheldon Keefe loves his game because he trusts him. There's a trust factor there. So when he lets him off his leash and he goes, hey, go play offense. Okay, you can go do it because I know what you're going to bring to us defensively. With Nick Robertson, it's the opposite. He wants to be one-dimensional. He wants to score. He wants to do that, but he hasn't earned the right yet. He's not good enough to be supreme at it compared to like the stars and the usually top 6 teams, where you need to be good defensively first. And Nick and his brother, you see that you're at home. And I don't want to state this, but like he's made comments before about his brother, being in a different situation and stuff like that, where I just don't think that's good. You're turning on your phone, you're talking to your family, where everyone knows the success his brother has had, right? So for me, it's just one of those ones where I don't know the message he's getting at home versus what he's getting at the rink. But for me, you need to be a responsible player first if you want to play in this league, if you aren't a superstar. So I don't feel that guilty for him. I think he needs to adapt his game and figure it out.
It is one of the most polarizing conversations you can have in Leafs Nation right now. How the chat's going on fire about it. Daniel writes in that he played with Matthews one game, got an assist, was pulled off that line right away, and people will just till they're blue in the face still tell you Nick Robertson's the top 6 guy. But again, I'm right there with you, and I believe you more than most people because you were in the NHL. You face guys like that, and there's a lot of players like Nick Robertson. There's less of the other ilk where their guys are just superstars and star players, and guys who take their game to the next level. So looking forward next time out, I think bottom line, Nick Robertson needs to play some games. He goes down to the AHL, doesn't play. So we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. Meantime, every All-Star needs a sidekick to support them, just like every Wendy's meal needs a 6-piece of nuggets. And right now, Wendy's is teaming up with Daily Face-Off Fantasy to bring you weekly prizes like free nuggets, burgers, and more. So if you think you're an expert in all things hockey, prove it. And if you aren't already, start adding a 6-piece to your Wendy's order for just $3.49. It's the dynamic duo even you never saw coming. Sign up for Daily Face-Off today. Sponsored by Wendy's and the Wendy's app. Want to be one of the exclusive few to bring home a nuggie? Follow at Wendy's Canada on TikTok and check in daily at 3:49 p.m. Eastern time from March 11th to 15th to see how to get one. Then grab a 6-piece of nuggets for just $3.49 to celebrate. Terms and conditions apply. So a weird scheduling quirk. First of 2 meetings in Philadelphia in the next 5 days here, Huts, which is, I think, so interesting. But Toronto's won 11 of 14 since Morgan Rielly was suspended. A very curious matchup against the Philadelphia team without John Tortorella again, right? He was suspended.
Yeah. Torts did his little song and dance there as he's grandstanding down in Tampa while they're honoring his Stanley Cup champion team. That is so Torts. I'm sure like the guys in the press box that played for him, the Stanley Cup team, are like, Oh man, we've seen this shit before. So I find it funny. I think this is a good matchup. It's a big matchup. And for me, it's going to be a big game, right? Like the Flyers need points, right? They have kind of sputtered a bit. I love the bounce back after getting pounded 7-0. You know, Earson comes back next game, plays really well. They win. So I think it's going to be a tough game for the Leafs because the Flyers are playing well. They have a complete team, and it's one of those teams that just, I think all year I've just been waiting for them for the bottom to fall out. Like I just never thought, like I'd be lying here if I told you they'd still be a third in the Metro. So there's a lot of pressure coming, and they've played well. They've kind of answered the bell. So this would be a really good challenge, I think, for both teams here.
Yeah, I think it's interesting considering where Philadelphia was a year ago. They sort of were a buyer and a seller at the trade deadline, and then all of a sudden they're still in a playoff spot as we have this conversation 5 weeks away from the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs. But again, the Leafs will be in tough in this game. They took care of business the first time around, of course, at Scotiabank Arena on February 15th, the 4-3 OT win, a wild game, that one. Again, no torts. But Ilya Samsonov will start for the second straight game. I know they've had some time off since Saturday in that victory in Montreal, but since the waiver stint, man, the numbers are impeccable. 12-3-0, 2.37, 9-11, and one shutout. Are you stunned that they went back to Samsonov here?
No, not stunned at all. He's earned it at this point, right? I think I've probably been the biggest Samsonov basher you could find when he was struggling.
Yeah.
But he looks better. Just his body language, he's so much more dialed in on the puck. And you can't really deny his last 15 games, right? If you split it in half here, his first 15 versus the last 15, he's been awesome. So I think it's earned, but I still wouldn't say it's his crease. I still think there's so much hockey left. And I think Joseph Woll has been disappointing last week. I think the game at home against the Bruins, definitely wasn't his fault. I think they left him hanging a lot. There was a lot of good chances. Where the game in Boston, there's a few I think I'd like back, especially the Carlo one from the point untipped. Just a goal you can't give up. But I also think he's only 3 games removed from being injured, and he's still you're like trying to catch a moving train at this point. So this little bit of rest here, an extra time off, and then Samsonov gets a start. I still like this 1A, 1B. Let's push each other. So who's ever going come playoff time is going to get the crease. And Samsonov right now has been the guy. So I'm not surprised he gets in that tonight.
Man, you talk about polarizing combos. Just mention Toronto's crease in this market. Like 2 weeks ago, we were talking about Joseph Woll being a Vezina candidate and winning the Calder Trophy. Now all of a sudden people are like, no, we need Sammy in there. Like, Woll sucks. Like, it's crazy on a game-by-game basis, man. I can see why goaltenders struggle in this market, man. It is absolutely outrageous and wild, the takes I hear on a daily basis on social media, and I see them as well.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. It's what have you done for me lately position, right? I feel like I felt that way when I played on certain markets. Obviously not the same magnitude as Toronto, especially with social media now and everyone can have a voice and an outcry to what's going on. I think they've managed this pretty well. And they look like geniuses right now with the way Samsonov is playing, giving him that sabbatical, taking him away from the team, letting him reset. And for me, I don't think Woll's done. I still think Woll is your goalie of the future, just with his ceiling is a lot higher for me. He's just more poised, his reads, the way he plays. And when he's off, he's not really off in a sense. Like it's minor. Where when Samsonov's playing bad, it is tough to watch. Samsonov reminds me of me. Like when I was bad, I was dog shit. Right? I'd be all over the map. I was chasing the game. I was moving too much. When I watch Woll, he reminds me of not to that extent, but maybe like a Connor Hellebuck. He doesn't move as much. He lets the game come to him. So even if he is fighting it a bit, he's just bigger. He's in position, so it's not as ugly. But when I'm bad, I'm bad. Trust me. And Samsonov's bad. We saw how that goes.
Yeah, we did. And for those of you in the chat who believed what I said about winning the Vezina and all that, I was just being a jerk off, which I normally do on this podcast to begin with. But what I'm trying to get at is that Leafs fans were calling Joseph Woll the next Carey Price like 2 weeks ago, and all of a sudden he sucks. I think you just have to stay level-headed. I mean, the position better than most people, clearly. I think it's going to take him some time. Like you've talked about it ad nauseum the last couple months, how difficult it is to come back from any injury, never mind a high ankle sprain. I'm giving Woll a couple of weeks, but I think the thing is, and the concern is, man, like the playoffs are around the corner. And I think if we're having the convo right now, it's Ilya Samsonov for me, because I think you have to go with your best foot forward. No?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think right now, if the playoffs started today, it'd be Samsonov. I hate saying that because I'm such a Woll supporter, but I also don't think it's too late for him too, right? I still think there's time to sputter, and not that you want them. I think pushing each other both is okay as well too, right? Like some internal competition where these guys can just play off each other, and there's enough games going around that it's not like you need the rest like even if you had a guy that was definitely your starter and your backup at this time of year, you're trying to get them both going as well, because you want to peak at the right time. So if you look at any team that has an outright starter, whether it's, say like Shesterkin, Quick is still going to be getting mixed in. If it's Skinner, Picard is still going to be mixed in, because they're trying to get their guy ready to rock. So I think at this point, having 1A, 1B is fine. And this time of year for me as a backup is sometimes when I earn my money as well, because I knew I was going to get a few more starts because we're trying to set up the table. When I played with Pecorine, I was trying to set the table him because we had plans of having a long playoff run. You want him to be ready. So I don't think this is a bad thing by any means, but I like Samsonov's game right now a lot. Just even his body language. I know I said that earlier, but if you watch him, how dialed he is, like he's so dialed in, he's compact. Even if saves or goals, he just seems so much more focused. Where when you watch clips earlier in the year, he's an absolute mess. Like just his body language and what that sends to the team is a message that's tough to see when you see your goalie struggling. I can say that from experience. When you're struggling, trust me, the team struggles.
Man, he was doing his best Michael Phelps like 3 months ago, where he's just swimming everywhere. And I think that he's been very stable and very compact in there, and it's great to see. Dude, we need a docu-series on Martin Jones, like what that cat's up to these days, where it's like you're eating caviar in the National League. You are not getting anywhere close to game action, man. Like this guy must be enjoying the press box popcorn, Scotiabank Arena. It's bar none, some of the best in the league. But like, I would love to know the day-to-day intricacies of being a third string netminder in the NHL, man.
Well, you can talk to me, buddy. I did it a lot, right? And for me, like his is so well earned, right? It's not like he's just like some guy that, got his golden ticket. Like he's much earned. And he's a guy that you never know what can happen, right? You look at Vegas last year, teams always need goalie depth. And there's days when you're the third guy, it sucks because you just go out and you do your thing and you get put through the ringer, and then you'll be in the gym because they're like, well, you got to stay ready. You got to be in shape. So it gets a bit monotonous, but when you're cashing your paycheck and you're flying on the plane and you're staying at the Ritz, it's okay. You learn to manage it pretty well. I think it's more of a mental test for a guy like that has a lot of experience and he wants to play, right? He's competitive, but at the same time, he's a perfect guy for this role because he's not going to rock the boat. He's going to just support Wall and Samsonov. So, and also for his teammates, just be there as a support factor, especially with his playoff experience.
With more than 4,400 hair salons throughout the United States and Canada, Great Clips is the world's largest hair salon brand and official hair salon of the NHL. Salons are locally owned and operated and open 7 days a week. Your time is valuable. Use the Great Clips check-in app. See the wait time. Check in on your phone and get your haircut when you want. For more information, check out greatclips.com. Great Clips, it's going to be great. We'll tie this into a question we got about potentially re-signing Ilya Samsonov. And I want to get your thoughts too. I don't know if you caught this yesterday. We had Ron McLean on the show, and I think he snuck in there that Kelly Rudy was like the whisperer behind Ilya Samsonov. Did you know this? Because I didn't know it. I don't think it was public knowledge.
No, I didn't know this. I read the clip about you saying that Kelly Rudy did this, and yeah, it's awesome. I love it. I don't know how much that has an impact. Obviously, he has a close relationship with Tree Living, his time in Calgary, and getting to know the GM, and maybe just some veteran goalie eyes, right? Kelly's been around the game for a long time. He could see how much he was struggling and knew that he needed a reset, and they had a chance to do it with Martin Jones there to help out. And yeah, it's wild. It obviously paid off, and I don't know how much truth there is to it, but let's give Kelly Rudy some props on this one.
Pretty crazy, man. Like, again, go back and listen to that interview yesterday with Ron McLean. Pretty much alluded to the fact that Kelly Rudy spoke to Brad Tree Living and said, hey, just get him away from the ice. Just let him chill out for a bit and then come back and retool and reset. And he nailed it. I mean, that's a pretty epic story that I don't think anybody had public knowledge of it. And it's little things like that. I mean, the ideology of a goalie in this league, he just needed to park it for a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, and it's hard too. I think from a competitive standpoint, as a goalie, to want to do that too, right? I'm sure this is the last thing he wanted. And for Tree Living or whoever it was, the goalie coach, to come in and step in and make that call and be like, hey, we still like you. We know you're good. You just need to get away from it for a bit. And the great Mitch Korn, goalie coach, always used to tell me, you don't lose talent overnight, right? And it's something that in the moment, it's hard to understand, right? Like, it's not like he's became a bad goalie instantly. It's just between his ears, right? And when you're struggling, it's like you're in quicksand, right? You're trying to do more, but it's just not working. So for him to take that reset, get away from the game, has obviously been integral, because you look at him, he's 12-3 in his last 15, and he's been lights out, right? I know some of those games, his save percentage wasn't crazy, but, he's playing well, making timely saves where he wasn't getting that in the first half. And then a few of those games, he's been rock solid, making some grade A saves back to back to back. So it's been fun to watch, and it's cool hearing the little inside stories and, what went on during that process.
Would you entertain the idea of bringing back Ilya Samsonov after this season? And do you want to see how it plays out in the postseason?
Oh, I definitely, I don't know.
I'm
What
done.
scares
See you
me.
later, buddy.
Yeah, I know. What scares me is the contract, right? Like, what is he going to
Yeah.
want? What are you going to give him? And the commitment to that. I just feel like with his track record of mailing it in and even his struggles early in his career, like in Washington, like I know there was lots of, veteran Russian players there and he got in trouble for a lot of different things. I think it's, he got sucked into it a bit, but I don't know, man. This is a big commitment, especially when you have Joseph Wall. I think he's the goalie of your future. And you can go find a guy that can be a serviceable backup for Wall and try to get Wall next year into that 50 games, as long as he can stay healthy.
People are talking about the Hildebeest for next year. How about Martin Jones? I know it's tough to rely on a Joseph Woll who gets hurt quite a bit, and it's a very volatile position. But that's my wonder is who they insulate the crease with, because I'm right there with you. I just think he's price tagged himself out, and on top of that, the player, the file. I just don't think I'd revisit that again. He's having a great year. It's a contract year too. You can't forget that. But I'm ready to move on from Samsonov, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't think Martin Jones is done by any means. I think he's
Yeah.
played well, and he started to drop off a bit, but that was when he was playing 3 to 4 games a week, right? He was busy playing every single game, and I don't know if sometimes people understand the wear and tear of that. In my prime, playing 3 games a week is hard, right? And especially at Martin
Mhm.
Jones's age, and there's a lot of demand. So if you get him in a little sweet spot where he's getting a start every week, that's kind of where you want him to be. So it's definitely a possibility. I just don't think you go out and shop and you get another guy, even if you could re-up Martin Jones just to have him in the cupboard in case something happens. But
Yeah.
there's nothing more than this season has showed how important goalies are, right? Everyone needs goalie depth.
Oh, brother, don't worry. We can't wait to have that, or I can't wait to have that USAROS conversation this summer, because it's coming, and you're going to be with me when you have that conversation, especially if something happens in the postseason and that Mitch Marner name is going to come up again. We're going to have many, many conversations about the Leafs crease moving forward. The following interview is brought to you by Tim Hortons. Roll Up to Win is back for Tim's 60th anniversary. And to celebrate their big year, you can win some big prizes like an all-electric Volkswagen ID4, a sun-soaked Hilton getaway, and cash with a daily jackpot of $10,000. Play today on the Tim's app. As mentioned, we spent some time earlier this week with this man, Ilya Lyubushkin. Enjoy.
Bush, obviously, thanks for joining us, buddy. It's good to see you again. And, being teammates in Arizona and in Toronto, obviously getting traded back to the Leafs here. What are you thinking your second time around? You're coming in to try to help this team, win some playoff games.
Yeah, I think it's a good trade for me because it's so easy to join this team. I know this organization, I know these teammates, and I want to say they best guys, and it's amazing to be here in all around, and yeah, I gonna try to do my best to help team, and yeah, we'll see.
Bush, what did you miss the most about Toronto?
Probably teammates. It's unbelievable, guys.
Yeah, they have a lot of good players there, right? Everybody knows that. And you and Joel Edmondson, 2 guys I played with. Does it ever come to you, does Keefe come to you and kind of explain to you what he wants from you? Or are you a guy that you just know your role and you're going to go out there and play?
Yeah, I think it's everyone know my role in this team, and yeah, I just have to be physical, to play tough to against, and all stuff.
Bush, can you take us behind the scenes how it all went down? So you were in San Jose, if I recall, and then you got pulled from the ice. How did that all go down? And what was your emotion? What was your thought level when you found out it was the Maple Leafs again?
Yeah, it's I was so excited, and yeah, I just call my wife and say, yeah, I have to go to Toronto right now, and she was happy too, and all my family, my kids, and yeah, happy.
That's great to hear, obviously, because I know you spent time in Buffalo. I was in Buffalo. We spent time in Arizona. I spent time with the Leafs. So we're kind of on the same path there. We've played in a lot of the same markets. What separates Toronto for you compared to those teams, getting to play in, obviously, with the Toronto Maple Leafs and wearing that crest?
I think like team like Buffalo, Anaheim, Arizona, they just try to get playoff. Toronto, they have a different level. They wanna win cup. And it's big difference.
Bush, you talked about it a bit. Obviously, you've been through it here in this market. That's certainly going to help. But what's your level of excitement when it comes to being back in the Stanley Cup playoffs? I know you guys got a bit more work to do before you can clinch a playoff spot. But what would that mean to you to be back in the postseason? And what was it like the first time around when you got to experience that in Toronto, especially?
So I think, guys, playoff it's a way different game. It's so hard, but you I think every players it's like dream wanna play playoffs, and it's same for me. Like when it's happened, you're gonna play first game, you get tired and started think, oh my god, how can I play next game? But next day you feel fresh and go again. It's one of the best feeling in the hockey.
Yeah, I think people know that who haven't been involved in the playoffs. Even for me, just the atmosphere and the energy that's produced by that. When you go into this playoffs, right, is there a team or someone you think in your division that you want to play against in the first round? Obviously, it was a tough week against the Bruins. Is this something that you think you want to play, or is it just you guys worry about the Toronto Maple Leafs first?
Yeah, it's what I thought. Like we have to think about our team first, and I say like if you wanna win cup, it doesn't matter what team you have to start. It's long way, or it's long way. Yeah, you have to go step by step and just uh, be ready.
Yeah, it's an odyssey. It's a journey for sure. Obviously, you've only been around for a couple weeks. It seems like you've been here for a while now, but obviously a lot of moving parts. How you feeling, by the way? Because I know you took that hit from Matt Rempe. We were talking about it on this show. Just how difficult it was to dissect that type of hit because of how big that boy is, eh?
Yeah, he's pretty tall, not pretty, so tall. Yeah, and. Hockey it's physical game. Maybe I have to protect myself little difference. I was ready for this hit, but maybe don't expect it what he's so tall. And like maybe I can change my position a little bit. But he's heavy guy. It's part of hockey.
Yeah, you're a guy that knows how to protect himself. And you getting traded this team I was pumped, buddy. I played with Jake McCabe for a long time. I played with Joel Edmondson and you. I think this is what this team needs. So, for me, obviously I understand the side of it. You leave your family behind, you move on, and this is part of the game. How are you dealing with that transition, right? I know you have kids, out in Anaheim right now. How is that mentally and, physically?
It's really hard for us, but I think my family, my kids, my wife, they understand what it's part of my business. It's my dream, and it's you can have it with chance like once in your career. I get second time chance, and yeah. So it's hard for family, but we try to stay together, be on phone like every day in FaceTime. It, all good.
I felt the same way as Huts did about you coming back, and you get a second chance to play with Morgan Riley. What's it been like being back with Morgan?
He's one of the best NHL defensemen, and it's amazing what I have a chance to play with him together on the same line. It's no worlds. Like he's great guy and great player.
Well, Boosh, it's been so great catching up with you again. Welcome back to Toronto, man. Can't wait for the stretch drive and appreciate you doing this today.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Boosh. Good seeing you, my man.
Enjoy nice weather. Finally.
Thanks, Boosh. That was awesome, buddy.
Thank you, guys.
There you have it, Ilya Lyubushkin, and I'm sure it's a change of pace, I would say, from Anaheim to Toronto, although the weather's been much better lately.
Yeah, change of pace for me and you talking. He slows it down a little bit, though, Boosh. But great of him jump on. Obviously, a good teammate, and it's nice to have him back here in Toronto.
Yeah, what a legend, man. And again, I think the revealing part of that interview, too, was like humanizing the situation of like getting traded around deadline time, where it's like, I think he was bitterly honest. Like, it's been difficult for his family. And you sort of forget that as a fan, as a media member, you get excited about the acquisitions, but you sort of lose sight of like what happens behind the scenes, you know?
Yeah, it's tough. When I got traded, same thing. Like my wife and kids stayed in Arizona. We ended up shipping them up. We had to get our dog driven across the country to
Jeez.
Buffalo, and then we
Yeah.
got a car service from Buffalo up to Toronto just for our dog. Like this is, I know this is first world problems, and I don't want to like err on the side.
Oh, I
Like
love dogs, man. Big dog guy.
I come from a blue collar family and like a Thunder Bay, like where we are. But like at the same time, man, this affects a lot of people. But this is the life we chose, right? You're an NHLer and you're making lots of money. And, you know, he's got 2 kids and a pregnant wife in Anaheim that can't come see him. And you're stuck FaceTiming them. So there's a lot that gets sacrificed as well along the way.
So we referenced earlier on Peter Mrazek, John Gibson almost went at it on Tuesday. Thank you to everybody who sent us the tape on YouTube. We got video proof of your scrap in the minors with Peter Mrazek. Why don't you break it down? Pink in the rink night, I guess, eh?
Yeah, that's me in the pink there. It really brings out my eyes.
Oh,
And that's Mrazek. Mrazek jumped in the pile. There was a line brawl, and he tried to jump Wade Brookbank, one of the legend tough guys from Saskatchewan. And I was hot. We were getting pumped 6-2. They had Tatar and Nyquist on their team. I remember they used to just absolutely own me in the minors. And I went down hot, and Peter bit off a little more than he can chew. Not that I'm a big fighter by any means. I had been in a few in junior, and I don't know if Peter had ever been in one, so I just made sure that I got the first one in, and then from there I just teed off on him. And I had family and friends in the crowd too, so that's a good fond memory for a lot of people in my American League Hockey League days.
man, I have to give you props. Like, I didn't know that you were going to be wailing like that. I think you fed him his lunch. Like, I thought Mrazek would probably have the upper hand in a fight, but like he stood no chance because we know him back to like his days at the World Junior. I think he played back-to-back years, and he was known as like kind of a snap show. And then he went to the AHL, same type of story. So to think somebody put him in his place the way you did, maybe that's why you got the call up to the show eventually.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I remember my agent calling me after giving me a hard time because I missed the next game because my wrist was all jammed up. But it's one of those ones where, you know, maybe it's a little more he's all bark, no bite, right? Where for me, I never really did that. I tried to just play goal, and I was just overheating that day, and things had hit the fan. So I flew down, and it worked out pretty well for me. It's funny looking back on it now. It's obviously a fond memory. And my buddies were there. I had 4 friends. So they were down in the dressing room after, and it was family night. And they had a picture. I wish I still had it, but it was a picture like the injury report from the doctors, Mrazek. And then he was much better than me in the American League that year. He was having a great year. So he was in the All-Star game like a week later. In the report, it said he had a broken nose too. And when he went to the All-Star game, he had 2 big shiners. So I had a ton of people messaging me on Twitter, sending me the photo of Mrazek like starting lineup at the All-Star game with 2 black guys, compliments of me.
Man, the chat's loving it. Boys Soul writes, does Nick have it in his contract? He has to be co-hosted by a fighter. I think so. And some pigeon named Jay Rosehill writes in, ha ha ha, yes, Huts. He also writes in, fed him his lunch. I'm guessing that's my co-host, Jay Rosehill, or an imposter.
Yeah, I like it. I need the breakdown from Rosie, right? He actually knows what he's doing. So I got in 1-0, that's it. And then some of the goalies, I've had a few games in the NHL where, you know, the goalie gets heat and you look down, it's like Mike Smith or some like monster. And I'm like, I don't know. I'd rather go against the Czech guy. So,
Oh, man, Mike Smith could throw them. He was one of the best. There was
oh,
some great legendary goalie fights back in the day. Ray Emery, of course, like the pinnacle. Razor?
yeah. I played with Ray. Actually, that first game I talked about being up with Brian Boucher, Ray Emery was there and he was out. That's kind of who I was replacing. And I remember him coming in to meet me and like say hi. And I was just like a deer in the headlights, like so scared. Like I didn't know where to
Yeah.
look. I'm like, man, this is Razor. So God rest his soul. But he was a great
Yeah.
guy and a good teammate to me. I spent some time with him in Chicago. So he's a great man and obviously had a great career.
Dave writes in, is that the real Jay Rosehill? Now there's controversy in the chat. Donnie Does Dishes, fake account. Yeah, I think it's a fake Jay Rosehill account.
Oh no, that's okay.
No,
I'm
I
sure
think it's
Rosie would
real.
say something nice about it.
I think it's real. Ban that fake Rosie account, handshake line respect. So a lot of controversy. Fake Rosie account says Big Kevin C. So there's a lot of controversy in the chat today. Maybe we can have Jay Rosehill answer those rumors coming up on tomorrow's show. Meantime, the Betano wrap-up is presented by Betano.ca. The game starts now. 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Major announcement. Betano is the official partner of Copa America 2024. Taking the beautiful game to new heights in the Americas, join Betano on their journey of passion, unity, and unforgettable football moments. The one play I do like, fresh off signing his extension, Bobby McMahon. I've been hitting that shot prop He's been over that 2.5 number in 6 straight games. So I'm playing it again tonight against Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think that's a good play here. I think he's going to be one of those guys that just doesn't sign his ticket and shut the mill here. But the game I'm going to be watching tonight that I love is the Florida-Carolina game. I think that is just a great matchup. Can Carolina bounce back at home? And I think the under is an easy play there in that game with Bobrovsky and Freddie Anderson playing.
Dude, there's some really, really good games on the slate, right? You got that one. You got the Islanders Buffalo one. I'd love to know if you think the Sabres are alive. So I do work with Pete Jensen of the NHL Fantasy on Ice team. And this guy, that is his move every year. He gets on that Buffalo bandwagon. He is fucking creaming over Bo Byron being a Buffalo Sabre. I'm like, dude, I think dating back to the Carter Hutton era, Buffalo has done this where it's like they're flirting, they're around, but they're never getting the girl. They're never going home with her.
Yeah, we had some streaks there. We won 10 in a row. I had 8 in a row personally. I remember we were planning the Stanley Cup parade and there was a lot going on. And then we couldn't win a game. I think at one point we dropped 16 straight one year or something crazy.
Ooh,
and
fuck.
between, there was times where it was me, then there's times it wasn't me, right? It was my first year. I thought I played really well there, but then there was games where I would be lights out and we'd still give up 4, right? Because they gave up so many chances. We were loose. And I love this push by Buffalo, and UPL's been awesome. One of the best goalies in the league since Christmas. So it's fun to watch.
Yeah, and I think that the most important thing about that is that UPL emerging is like, Devin Levi can just do his thing in the AHL. I think so many teams the last couple of years, and again, you can speak to this, have been victim of trying to rush these young guys along, like even in Florida, right? I mean, around this league, it's teams are in a rush. Maybe it's because of the cap hit to get these guys in the National League where it never hurt anybody to play a couple of years in the AHL, regardless of how good they are,
No, I think it's where teams are at times too, right? Like if you're a team that's built to try to win and you don't have a goalie, so you're going to go get a veteran, or you're going to push that young guy into a situation, or sometimes where, you're developing the team, you're in a rebuild and you have this good younger goalie. It's like, well, let's get him games because if we win or lose, it doesn't matter. But taking scrutiny in the NHL instead of the American League can be hurtful, right? You can go down to the American League, take your bumps and bruises, play your bad games instead of having the whole world watching you. And it's a little more private. And you can develop into who you are. So I think there's time to stew. And it's nice that UPL's doing well, because I remember a few years ago, everyone mailing him in that he sucks and he's brutal and he's this and he's that. And now look at him, right? It takes time. Being an NHL goalie is hard. And there's a lot of mental capacity you need to learn before you can run with it.
Well, man, even Jake Ottinger in Dallas, he's got an 899 through like 42 appearances. Like, it just takes time. I always reference like Connor Hellebuck, John Gibson, those guys were not until like 24, 25, they really find their groove at the NHL level. So there's a lot coming. I think patience is a virtue. Hutz, excellent job. And I'm looking forward to actually watching a Leafs game tonight. Don't forget to check out the Leafs Nation After Dark with Zach Phillips as well coming up tonight.
Yeah, I'll look forward to it. Obviously, it's nice to get them back on the sheet tonight. So it's going to be a good matchup. Let's see what they can do in Philly here.
And thank you once again to Ilya Lyubushkin for dropping by earlier this week, recording that interview with us. Thank you to everybody in the chat. You guys have been fantastic at the Leafs Nation 401, where you can subscribe, hit that like button as well. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcasts. Many thanks to producer Vic. As per usual, great job, Jay Rosehill. Back in the mix tomorrow. We're going to recap this one against Philadelphia and get you set for Saturday night. They'll wear the St. Patty's uniforms and host the Carolina Hurricanes. For Carter Hutton, I'm Nick Alberga. Talk tomorrow. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews. We got clips. We got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.